What is up, guys? Well, today is October 1st. Spooky season is finally officially kicked off, and that also means we have peeled yet another month of 2025 off of the calendar. So it's time to talk about all the brand new release films that I saw in the month of September 2025. And this is actually a pretty light month, especially compared to most months where I do at least more than double the amount of movies, which seems weird. My brain can't process it because I've almost seen 40 brand new releases in the calendar month of September, but only 5 of them are official releases that went wide. So 5 movies ranked from worst to best. If you guys are hungry for a much more substantial list than this on a bunch of films you can keep your eyes out for, just yesterday I dropped my ranking of all 27 films that I saw at this year's Fantastic Fest. A number of them are going to be coming out as early as the next couple of weeks. Many you're going to have to keep your eyes on for a couple of months, but a lot of really exciting films to check out, so I'll put a link up here for you to check that out. But as far as September 2025 releases, let's just go ahead and kick this bitch off with number 5, which happens to be one of the films that I did see at Fantastic Fest, and it is easily, by a landslide, no question, the worst film that I saw last month, and that is The Strangers Chapter 2. Now, to be honest, I've never really been huge on the Strangers franchise. If I had to pick one that I enjoy, it would be Prey at Night, but even that is like mild enjoyment. The first film that everybody loves, I was never all that crazy about. And when they did the Strangers trilogy, when Rennie Harlan was announced to be the director, I at least had some piqued interest because I'm a massive fan of him as a filmmaker. Strangers Chapter 1 was absolutely terrible. I'm pretty sure that was in my bottom 5 of the year that it came out. And Strangers Chapter 2, while I certainly was not going to bet money that it would be better than Chapter 1, I at least held out a little bit of hope that maybe they just had to get through Chapter 1, which was a very cheaply made, unsatisfying remake of the original Strangers, to get to Part 2 and 3, where hopefully a lot of their cool, more unique ideas were going to start to show their head. And that didn't fucking happen. This is a movie that I do think is mildly better than the first film. There's not quite as many infuriatingly stupid character decisions, retreading through a story I've already seen. There's not that level of pointlessness to it. But this Chapter 2 story is basically a 90-minute chase sequence where almost nothing happens, so it's pointless for a completely different reason. I think the main actress, Madeline Petch, is somebody that has a lot of talent. It's a shame that these 3 movies are not utilizing that talent at all, but aside from that, it's just one segment after another of her hiding in a room or running in a hospital or hiding in a cabin while one of the strangers is lurking around trying to find her. Many points in the film, they have her dead to rights, and yet they don't kill her. Like, clearly their mission in this movie is to clean up after the mess of the first film where they thought they killed her and they didn't, and trying to wrap up everything so that they don't get caught. And yet many times throughout the film, they have a perfect opportunity to do that and they just continue to fuck with her. Likewise, she has plenty of opportunity to double tap one of these motherfuckers and absolutely never does. So it's quite literally a sequence that would be like a 10-minute sequence in the middle of the second act in any other slasher film, and they decided to make an entire chapter out of that. You have a random as fuck, ginormous wild boar attack in this film that just feels weirdly out of place. It's horribly CGI'd. Like, everybody in my screening at Fantastic Fest was absolutely bewildered at this sequence. And ultimately, all it builds to is starting to barely answer some questions about the strangers, which is the identity of the pinup girl, as well as the meaning behind the whole "is Tamara home" calling card that these guys have every time they start to stalk somebody. And I'm not really interested in the answer to either of those questions, not only because the ones that they give us I couldn't care less about, and they're certainly not worth sitting through 2 movies to build to that. But more importantly, trying to answer those questions is the complete antithesis of what the Strangers' appeal is. They're the strangers. That's the point. You don't know who they are. You don't know their identity. There's no significance to that, nor should you even know if there was. And their motivation for killing you, it's because you're home, bitch. There's no other reason beyond that. So to formulate an entire trilogy of movies that's only significant objective above the previous 2 films is to start to answer these questions that no fan was asking, why do you exist? Why are we doing this? And now that we've seen 2 out of these 3 films where basically nothing of substance actually happens, yet again, we're treated with a to be continued and a little teaser sizzle reel as the post-credit sequence for when all the real crazy shit's gonna happen in Chapter 3. And it's like, how many of these fucking movies do I have to sit through before you get to the damn point? So yeah, Didn't like this movie at all. If it wasn't for the fact that Crushed was just absolutely offensive to no end to me, this would have been easily the worst film that I had seen at any of the Fantastic Fests that I have attended, and it is by far the worst wide release, new release that I saw during September. Coming in above that at number 4 is Him. This is the new film that is produced, not directed, by Jordan Peele, and it is essentially a sports horror film. And this movie had the potential to be something really cool. In and of itself, it's unique. I haven't really seen too many sports horror films, and there is a serious visual flair to this movie. It's got a really wild stylistic element to it, but it's absolutely style over substance. This is a movie that the overall point of what they're trying to do here, which is being really clever and really poignant about some kind of a message of selling your soul for fame, essentially, you get the point of that by like the end of the first act, and the rest of the film just kind of continues to repeat that message over and over and over again, and doesn't really do anything to unpack it or even express it in a different or unique way as the film goes on. So even just watching the trailer, I got that impression from the movie. So there was really no ultimate point or revelation or any kind of a climax involved with this film that was worth staying through the end to, because you pretty much hear everything they have to say by the end of the first act. I could see some people appreciating this movie way more than I did. Now, it didn't get reviewed very well, so it seems the majority has fallen on not being too impressed with it, but I could see somebody being a lot more interested in the visuals and even just liking the fact that they're blending two genres of films that don't typically shake hands with each other. I just wish we had a lot more under the surface, because this really could have been something special. As is, it just kind of felt like a bit of a dud. Coming in at number 3, the massively successful The Conjuring Last Rites. This is the 4th official Conjuring film, and what was originally said to be the final Conjuring film and the closeout of phase 1 of the Conjuring universe. I don't know whether the success of this film has changed those plans or not, but I would not be surprised, because this thing set a whole bunch of records, made an ass load of profits for the studio, and so we're definitely going to be getting a lot more in this universe, that's for sure. Nonetheless, the Conjuring films, the first 2 primarily, I think are easily the best movies by a landslide that we've ever gotten from the, 9 or 10, maybe even 11 films we've gotten in this franchise so far, and I didn't really care for the third one all that much, so I held out a bit of hope that maybe the 4th film, they would take some of the criticisms from the last one and make this more in line with the first 2. But then they hired the director that made The Conjuring 3 and The Nun 2 and La Llorona, and he's responsible for 2 of what I would say the worst films in this franchise and the one most mediocre film in the franchise. So I'm sure the guy's a great person, but as a filmmaker, he just doesn't really do a lot to impress me. Unfortunately, The Conjuring Last Rites is kind of more the same from him. Now, I do think it's a mildly better film than The Conjuring The Devil Made Me Do It. I think that there was a little bit more to invest yourself in here, finding the Warrens kind of towards the end of their life when they're looking at retirement and they're reflecting on family and their daughters trying to get married, and all of those familial drama type elements, the more sweet and emotional elements, was actually my favorite piece of the film. None of the actual horror stuff really worked for me. I didn't think the central mystery here about this presence inside of this house was all that interesting, and kind of felt very derivative of movies we've already seen, especially within the 4 Conjuring films. The entities, once they actually reveal themselves, I think are among the least interesting that we have ever seen. There's not really a demonic or a real scary image that really jumps out at you here. It's just kind of silly CGI'd ghost people with weird smiles on them. So I thought that was a bit of a missed opportunity for sure. And ultimately, it's all because of a haunted mirror, which, if Mike Flanagan has already made a movie about a haunted mirror, don't try to outdo Mike Flanagan, and they certainly don't come close to doing even that. As is, I thought the movie was fine. Like, if you're a massive fan of this universe, I'm sure you really loved it and you enjoyed it way more than me. If you're somebody who has had more misses than hits, but certainly appreciates when this franchise does hit, I think that you'll get enough here where you'll at least enjoy yourself. It's not a complete waste, but it's a far cry from what we got in the 2 James Wan films. And I just wish that for the Conjuring films, if nothing else in this universe, they would treat them all as like the Avengers of the Conjuring universe. Like, pull out all the stops, put your best foot forward. Don't keep giving it to the guy who has had a proven track record of making money, but nobody really likes his movies. Humongous jump from our number 3 to our top 2. And coming in at number 2 is Paul Thomas Anderson's brand new film titled One Battle after another. Now, I don't really have a whole lot of experience with Paul Thomas Anderson. I previously said I'd only seen one of his films. I actually looked into it, and correction, I've seen two. I've seen Boogie Nights and I've seen Punch Drunk Love, but that is it. So I am fairly green when it comes to this guy's filmography, and I plan on changing that very soon because of how much I enjoyed this film. This was one of the secret screenings at Fantastic Fest. It was only a couple days before its official release, but nonetheless, that happens sometimes. And we got to watch the 70 millimeter print of the film, which certainly looked amazing. And what I enjoyed about this movie was that it's filled with really great characters that I really enjoyed, even though they're presented initially as basically left-wing terrorists that are blowing shit up and shooting people and doing a bunch of terroristic acts for their political views. You get this time jump after the prologue where the mother of Leo DiCaprio's daughter kind of goes off into exile because she's the one who's really dedicated to the cause. And Leo DiCaprio, being that they have a daughter, he kind of gives up all that and just decides to make his daughter the top priority of his life. And then years later, when she's like 16, 17, his past catches up with them, and suddenly he has to go on this mission to save his daughter. As a father of 3 kids, 2 of which are girls, I can really get into that storyline. I can get into his character. And to me, I latched much more onto the side of this movie and its message about how no matter where you are in the political spectrum and what priorities you had in life, like family always comes first. And so that's really what I grabbed from the movie. And there's even a certain amount of like the daughter kind of representing taking the goals and taking the fight of your parents and your previous generation and hopefully doing it in a better way. They don't completely stick that by the end of it, but I'm giving them grace by like trying to push the message to that direction, because that's the version that I enjoy a little bit more. I think that it's shot wonderfully. There's one sequence in particular in the third act where there's a car chase and you're going up and down these hills, and it kind of creates like this ocean motion, and it's just a very cool way to do a car chase and to create tension because the leading vehicle keeps disappearing from the perspective, and that was a really cool thing that I think is very iconic. And that was the sequence that everybody pretty much was talking about after this. Is just a really unique way to do something that we've seen 1,000 times, a car chase. And then you have wonderful side characters. Benicio del Toro is an absolute standout, despite just being in the movie for a little bit. And Sean Penn as your villain here, I think, is one of his greatest characters ever. Certainly his best performance that I've seen since Mystic River. And it's almost like cartoonish how over the top his villain is, but like in the best way. This is a movie that definitely has like an offbeat comedy tone to it, but just the right amount of offbeat, because sometimes the weirdness of things like that can kind of turn me off, and I don't really vibe with that. It's not on my wavelength. This one was just off enough with some of the elements here that I could really appreciate it, and I could have a smile on my face despite some of the very dark things happening. So it's a movie that, you know, there was certainly some ambiguity there with the message that I think has been taken in a lot of weird directions by other people that have seen it. You know, people that are very hard on the left politically seem to take this movie as like some kind of fuck the man type movie, and we need to get behind this. It's about standing up for what you believe in. And I'm like, they're literally killing people and blowing shit up. That's a weird fucking way to take that message. And then I've even seen stuff pushed in the other direction where they're like, actually, it's a movie, it's about condemning all of that stuff because everybody that does all of that kind of goes through hell in the movie. And I'm like, I think you're stretching it quite a bit in that direction too. Nonetheless, because the movie doesn't really glorify or condemn those types of actions, it leaves so much ambiguity and room for people to interpret it the way that they want, which is fine. But I'm most comfortable with the way that I interpret it, which is just a story about a father and a daughter and how much family means and legacies and things like that. So I really enjoyed this one. I look forward to checking it out again, and I look forward to diving into PTA's filmography very soon. I actually have There Will Be Blood, and then my co-host Chuck from Lost in the Shadows, his favorite movie of all time is The Master, so I guess I'll follow it up with that one. So maybe a PTA ranking in the future. Not the near future, though. Give me some time. But even with how much I enjoyed my number 2, easily my number 1 of this month is The Long Walk. Now, this is the latest Stephen King adaptation that is adapting what I believe is his first book, not the one that was first published, but the one that was first written. And it's essentially telling the story about a bunch of teenage and early 20-something guys that sign up for this lottery game in a post-apocalyptic future where most of the country is in poverty and financial destitution, where essentially they all are forced to walk until they cannot walk anymore. And one by one, people drop off. You get shot if you stop walking for a certain amount of time or drop below a certain speed. and the last person alive gets this monstrous prize and is able to make one wish. And I just found this movie to be so powerful, so effective. I think they balanced all the different tones that you get in many different Stephen King stories. It's very thrilling and gripping and emotional. It's also very charming and funny, and it also has a few elements that are genuinely terrifying. So it's kind of like mixing the best of both worlds of something like Stand By Me and the relationships with the characters there, and even like the Shawshank Redemption, with something that has the thrills and the intensity of things like Misery. So it's literally the best of all worlds when it comes to Stephen King stories. And for a story that was written like back in the 60s, it is shockingly and sadly so pertinent to today's society. And I got some people that really got up in arms about when I was talking about this, which just baffles me and just shows me how fucking out of touch people are behind a keyboard. But essentially, something that I said in my review is that when you're watching this movie, there comes to a point where the violence and the ultimate message of the film, which is people kind of having this numbness to violence in this world, really hit home because of all of the crazy events that continue to happen around us. And especially the week after the week that this movie released, like there was a lot of things going on: political violence, school shootings, bombings, genocide happening across the world. And one of the big messages about the film, which really hit me, was there's a moment where you have the two main characters, and after somebody behind them falls behind and ends up getting shot in the face, one character turns to the other one and says, "I hope we get to a point where that stuff gets easier." And then the other character responds by saying, "That's actually what I'm most afraid of." Like, it's just a quiet, subtle moment when there's other much more like overtly big moments in the movie. But that was the most powerful moment of the entire film to me, because it just hit me going, wow, movies like this post-apocalyptic future type sci-fi, really don't feel that far out of reach anymore. Like, I remember feeling as a kid, even as a young adult, like, oh, that's fiction. That's something that, we'll never see that become reality. And it feels like we're just slowly creeping up to that as time goes on, with how much violence continues to happen, and more so, which was the ultimate point I was making, how indifferent so many of us get to that violence, and how just horrific things happening around us just becomes normal and commonplace. And as long as it doesn't touch our front door, we're just like, whatever, what's on Netflix? And that's a very scary reality. And so this was not just a great story filled with really great characters that had wonderful chemistry with each other, and you really start to get connected to all of them. And each time one of them starts to fall out of the race, like, you feel it. It's this gut-wrenching moment, and you get more and more tense as the movie goes on, really like wondering who is going to be the one who's the victor at the ultimate climax, but also like not really wanting anybody to win because you don't want to see anybody lose. And so they just did a fantastic job at crafting that story, and even doing some changes to the original story, which I've never read the full thing, but I read the synopsis of it, and I think I like the version in the movie better. There's a certain amount of ignorance that comes with that, of course, without actually having read the book, but the ending and a few other things, I think I would prefer the version here. And so this was one that, just as a piece of fiction, I thought was wonderful, but was all the more powerful with how little it really feels like fiction anymore. So number one, by a landslide, for September 25 for me, was The Long Walk. Well, that's it for this one, guys. If you enjoyed that, please click over here for all of my 2025 new release reviews. If you enjoy these month wrap-up videos, I'll put a playlist up here, and you can catch up on the rest of 2025 as we inch towards the end of this year already. Like, share, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss everything in the future. And as always, remember, opinions are like assholes, but that doesn't mean you have to be.